Captain Vexithera pressed her six-fingered hand against the cold metal wall of her command bridge. Through the viewing screen, she watched another one of her ships explode in a ball of green fire. The insect-like creatures they called the Swarm had torn through her fleet like paper. 3 weeks ago, she commanded 57 ships. Now only 12 remained, hiding behind chunks of broken rock in the asteroid field near Xerion Prime. The beautiful crystal formations of her home planet Kalar gleamed in the distance, unaware that death was coming for them. "Captain, the Swarm bioships are moving closer," reported her weapons officer Kolmar. His blue skin had turned pale with fear. "They have found 2 more of our hiding spots." Vexithera closed her large purple eyes. The Swarm was unlike any enemy they had ever faced. Their ships were alive, made of black metal that grew and changed like living tissue. Every time the Kalarian fleet fired their plasma weapons, the enemy hulls adapted. The bright energy beams that once cut through enemy armor now bounced off harmlessly. "How long until they reach Kalar Prime?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. "At their current speed, 18 hours, Kolmar replied quietly. 18 hours until 17 billion of her people died. Vexithera had seen what the Swarm did to planets. They consumed everything, the land, the water, even the air. Nothing remained but empty rock floating in space. "Captain, we could retreat to the outer colonies," suggested her navigation officer, a young female named Zara Lynn. "We could warn the other worlds, help them prepare." Vexithera shook her head. "And leave our people to die? No. We are the defense fleet. We defend, even if it costs us everything." But what could 12 damaged ships do against hundreds of Swarm vessels? Their weapons were useless. Their shields were failing. Even their fastest ships could not outrun the biocraft that moved like hungry predators through space. She walked to her captain's chair and sat down heavily. The soft blue light of the bridge made everything look peaceful, but peace was a luxury they could no longer afford. Outside, another explosion lit up the darkness as one of her patrol ships met its end. "Captain," Kolmar said carefully, "there is one option we have not considered." "What option?" Vexithera asked, though she suspected she knew what he would say. "The humans." The bridge fell silent. Even the soft humming of the ship's engines seemed to grow quiet. Asking humans for help was something no proud Kalarian captain had ever done. The creatures from the small blue planet called Earth were considered primitive by most of the galaxy. Their technology was old. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were simple metal projectiles instead of advanced energy beams. The Galactic Council barely acknowledged Earth as a member world. Human representatives sat in the back during meetings, rarely speaking, often ignored. Their military was seen as a curiosity, interesting to study but not useful in real warfare. "The humans cannot help us," Zara Lynn said firmly. "Their ships cannot even match our speed, let alone fight the Swarm." "Maybe not," Kolmar replied, "but they are the only ones close enough to reach us in time. The nearest Andromedan battle group is 6 days away. The Centauri Defense Force is even farther." Vexithera considered this. It was true that a human patrol ship had been spotted near the Jupiter system just days ago. If they responded immediately, they might arrive within hours. But what could they do that her advanced Kalarian vessels could not? Still, she thought of the children on Kalar Prime, the crystal gardens where she played as a young one, the singing towers that made beautiful music when the wind blew through them. All of it would be gone by tomorrow unless she tried everything. "Open a general distress channel," she commanded. "All frequencies." Her communications officer, Veltar, looked surprised. "Captain, are you certain?" "A general channel means everyone will hear our plea. Our enemies, our allies, even neutral parties." "Do it." Veltar's long fingers danced over his console. "Channel open, Captain." Vexithera stood up straight, trying to project confidence she did not feel. She spoke clearly into the recording device, knowing her words would travel across space to reach anyone listening. "This is Captain Vexithera of the Kalarian Defense Fleet, commanding the remaining ships of Battle Group 7. We are located in the Xerion asteroid field. Coordinates following this message." She paused, looking out at the stars. Somewhere among them was Earth, with its strange human inhabitants who might be their only hope. "The Swarm has broken through our defenses. We have lost most of our fleet. Their bioships have adapted to our weapons. We cannot stop them from reaching Kalar Prime, where 17 billion civilians await evacuation that will never come." Another pause. In the distance, she saw the dark shapes of swarm vessels moving between the asteroids like hunting creatures stalking prey. This message is directed to any human vessels in range. We know your ships are different from ours. We know your weapons work differently. Maybe that difference is what we need. She felt her voice crack slightly but continued. We are the last defense between the swarm and my homeworld. Our weapons cannot penetrate their adaptive hulls. Our tactics have failed. Please, if anyone from Earth is listening, we need help. Our people are counting on us and we are counting on you. Vexthara nodded to Veltar, who closed the channel. The bridge remained quiet for a long moment. Message sent, Captain. Veltar reported. It will reach the Sol system in approximately 4 hours. 4 hours for the message to travel through space. Then time for any human ships to receive it, consider it, and decide whether to help. Meanwhile, the swarm continued its advance toward Kalar Prime. Vexthara returned to her chair and waited. It was all she could do now. Wait and hope that somewhere among the stars someone was listening. Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan was drinking coffee in the pilot ready room when the distress signal came through. The bitter liquid had gone cold hours ago, but he sipped it anyway while reviewing flight patterns on his tablet. Around him, other pilots played cards or watched old movies on the wall screen. The Earth Defense Force carrier Liberty had been running routine patrols near Jupiter for 3 weeks. Nothing ever happened out here. The most exciting thing they had seen was a cargo freighter with engine trouble. All pilots report to the briefing room immediately. Admiral Kate Morrison's voice echoed through the ship's speakers. Priority Alpha. Jake looked up from his tablet. Priority Alpha meant real trouble, not just another drill. He had never heard those words used in actual service. The other pilots around him exchanged worried glances. They filed into the briefing room where Admiral Morrison stood before a large display screen. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had worked her way up from enlisted ranks. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her face showed the kind of seriousness Jake had only seen during the worst training scenarios. Gentlemen and ladies, she began. 47 minutes ago, we received a distress call from the Xerion system. An alien species called the Calarians is under attack from something called the Swarm. The screen showed a star map with the Xerion system highlighted in red. It was far outside normal human patrol routes, in a section of space controlled by the Galactic Council. The Calarians claim they have lost most of their fleet and cannot stop this swarm from attacking their home planet. They are asking for human assistance. Captain Lisa Hayes, the senior pilot, raised her hand. Ma'am, why would they ask us? The galactic powers have never wanted our help before. They barely acknowledge we exist. Admiral Morrison nodded grimly. That is exactly what makes this unusual, Captain Hayes. For a proud species like the Calarians to ask us for help means they are truly desperate. Jake studied the tactical information on the screen. The data showed swarm bioships that could adapt to enemy weapons, making them nearly impossible to destroy with conventional tactics. Their technology was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Admiral, Jake said, raising his hand, with respect, what could we possibly do that their advanced fleet could not? Our ships are slower than theirs. Our weapons are primitive compared to their energy systems. That is exactly the question I asked myself, Commander Sullivan, Morrison replied, which is why I have decided we will not be responding to this distress call. A murmur of surprise went through the room. Jake felt his stomach sink. 17 billion people were about to die and they were just going to ignore it? Ma'am, said Captain Hayes carefully, are we really going to let an entire planet be destroyed when we might be able to help? Hayes, look at the tactical data, Morrison said, pointing to the screen. These swarm bioships have defeated a fleet using technology decades ahead of ours. What exactly do you think our 20 fighters could accomplish against hundreds of adaptive alien vessels? Jake stared at the information display. Reading about the swarm's ability to change their hull composition to counter different weapon types. Something about the description nagged at him. He had read about similar concepts in his tactical studies. Permission to speak freely, Admiral? Jake asked. Morrison nodded. The data says these bioships adapt to counter specific attack patterns and weapon types, but they need time to make these adaptations, right? According to the Calarian report, yes. Several minutes between adaptations. Jake stood up, moving to the display screen. What if that adaptation ability is also their weakness? Look at this. He pointed to a section of the tactical report. The Calarians fight with coordinated attack patterns, precise formations, calculated timing, predictable weapon sequences. That is how military tactics work, Sullivan. Morrison said dryly. Yes, ma'am, but what if we did not fight that way? What if we fought completely randomly with no patterns at all? Captain Hayes looked confused. Jake, random tactics are just chaos. You cannot win battles with chaos. Maybe not against human enemies, Jake replied, his excitement growing as the idea formed. But these bioships adapt by recognizing patterns and finding counters. What happens when there are no patterns to recognize? Admiral Morrison studied him carefully. Explain. Jake grabbed a marker and drew on the electronic whiteboard. Look, the Calarians probably approach in formation. Fire coordinated volleys, follow established attack procedures. The swarm bioships learn these patterns and adapt their hulls accordingly. He drew chaotic lines across his diagram. But what if we approach from random directions at random speeds? What if we fire different weapons in unpredictable sequences? What if every pilot fights completely differently with no coordination at all? That sounds like suicide, not tactics, Captain Hayes said. Maybe, Jake admitted. But it also sounds like the one thing these adaptive bioships have never faced before. They are designed to counter logical military strategy. No one has ever tried countering them with pure chaos. Admiral Morrison crossed her arms. Even if your theory is correct, Sullivan, you're talking about flying into a battle zone with no backup, no support, and no real plan beyond be unpredictable. That is not warfare. That is a death wish. Permission to volunteer for a solo reconnaissance mission, Admiral? The room went completely silent. Morrison stared at Jake as if he had lost his mind. You want to fly alone into an alien war zone to test your theory about chaotic combat? Yes, ma'am. If I am wrong, we only lose one pilot instead of the entire squadron. If I am right, maybe I can buy the Calarian some time while we figure out a real strategy. Morrison shook her head. Request denied, Commander. I am not sending one of my pilots on a suicide mission based on a theory. Jake felt frustration building in his chest. Outside the briefing room windows, he could see Jupiter's great red spot slowly rotating. Somewhere beyond that peaceful view, billions of people were about to die. Admiral, what if the situation was reversed? What if Earth was being attacked and no one would help us because they thought we were too primitive to matter? Morrison's expression softened slightly, but she remained firm. Sullivan, I understand your feelings, but I have to consider the safety of this entire crew. I cannot authorize a mission that is essentially suicide. The meeting ended with orders to maintain standard patrol routes. Jake returned to his quarters feeling angry and helpless. He sat on his bunk staring at the ceiling while thinking about the distress call. That night, Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about Captain Vexithera's voice in the message. The desperation he had heard when she pleaded for help. He thought about 17 billion people facing extinction while he sat safely aboard a carrier ship, doing nothing. At a 300-hour ship time, Jake made his decision. He quietly got dressed and made his way to the fighter bay. His F-47 Hawk fighter sat in its launch position, fueled and ready for the morning patrol. The night shift technicians were in the break room and the bay was empty. Jake ran through his pre-flight checklist by memory, keeping his movements quiet. He had done this hundreds of times in training, but never with his hands shaking from nerves and adrenaline. As he prepared to launch, Jake recorded a message for Admiral Morrison. Admiral, by the time you hear this, I will be en route to the Xerian system. I know I am disobeying direct orders and I accept full responsibility. But I cannot sit here knowing we might be able to help and choosing not to try. Sometimes the right thing to do is not the safe thing to do. If my theory is wrong, you will never hear from me again. If it is right, maybe we can save some lives. Jake Sullivan, signing off. He launched his fighter into the cold darkness of space, setting course for a battle that would either prove humans belonged among the stars or get him killed trying. Jake's fighter dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Xerion system. What he saw through his cockpit window made his blood run cold. Pieces of destroyed ships floated everywhere like a metal graveyard. Some were clearly Calarian vessels, their elegant curved hulls now twisted and broken. Others belonged to species he did not recognize. Jesus, he whispered to himself, gripping his flight controls tighter. His sensors detected movement near the asteroid field. Dark shapes moved between the rocks like hunting predators. These had to be the swarm bioships. Even from this distance, Jake could see they were unlike anything in human military databases. They looked alive, with hulls that rippled and changed shape as they moved. Jake activated his communication system and broadcast on the frequency the Calarians had provided. This is Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan of the Earth Defense Force. responding to Captain Vexithera's distress call. "Is anyone out there?" Static filled his headphones for several seconds. Then a voice responded, speaking English with a strange musical accent. "Human vessel, this is Captain Vexithera. You came." She sounded amazed, as if she had not really expected anyone to respond. "Yes, ma'am. I am here to help if I can. What is your current situation?" "We have 9 ships remaining, hidden in the asteroid field at coordinates I am transmitting now. The swarm has over 200 bioships surrounding the area. They are searching for us methodically." Jake checked his instruments as the location data arrived. "I see your position. Captain, I need to ask you about these swarm ships. The data said they adapt to weapons and tactics. How exactly does that work? When we fire plasma beams at them, their hulls change to reflect the energy back at us. When we use particle weapons, they grow armor plating that absorbs the particles. Each adaptation takes about 3 minutes, but once they change, our attacks become useless. What about their behavior patterns? How do they fight?" "Very systematically. They form attack groups, coordinate their movements, strike with precise timing. They are extremely efficient." Jake smiled grimly. Efficient and systematic were exactly what he had hoped to hear. "Captain, I am going to try something. Please keep your ships hidden and observe what happens. If this works, I will explain how we can use it. If it does not work," he paused, "well, you will probably see me explode. Human pilot, what are you planning?" "Something no military academy would ever teach," Jake replied, cutting the communication. He flew his F-47 fighter toward the swarm vessels, staying low among the asteroids. His ship was tiny compared to the bioships, each of which was at least 10 times his size. Their black hulls seemed to pulse with organic life, and he could see weapon ports opening and closing like breathing mouths. Jake had disabled his ship's tactical computer and navigation assistance. For his plan to work, he needed to fight purely on instinct, with no computer-generated attack patterns for the swarm to detect and counter. 3 bioships detected his approach and moved to intercept him. Jake watched them form a perfect triangular formation, approaching at optimal firing angles just like any military manual would recommend. Their hulls began to change, probably adapting for whatever weapons they expected him to use. Instead of following any sensible attack plan, Jake did something completely random. He fired his left-side missile at the asteroid field, nowhere near the enemy ships. Then he barrel-rolled upward and fired his electromagnetic pulse cannon at empty space. The bioship seemed confused by this behavior, slowing their approach as if trying to understand his tactics. Jake laughed out loud despite his fear. "That's right, you ugly bugs. Try to figure that out." He dove straight down toward the largest bioship, then suddenly pulled up at the last second and fired his kinetic projectile cannon, simple metal bullets, at the ship's side. The bullets punched through the hull plating, which had not adapted to expect such primitive weapons. The bioship spun away, leaking atmosphere through the holes Jake had punched in it. The other 2 ships immediately began changing their hull composition to counter kinetic projectiles. Jake could see their armor growing thicker and harder, but instead of firing more bullets, Jake switched to his electromagnetic pulse weapon and hit the second ship while its hull was still adapting to kinetic threats. The EMP blast fried the ship's bioneural systems, sending it tumbling out of control. The third bioship, now adapted for both kinetic and electromagnetic attacks, moved in for the kill. Its weapon ports opened, and Jake saw energy building up for a massive blast. Jake did something that violated every rule of space combat he had ever learned. He flew directly toward the enemy weapon, then at the last possible moment, he shut down his engines completely and let momentum carry him past the bioship in an unpowered drift. The enemy's targeting systems, designed to track powered vessels following predictable flight paths, lost lock on his ship. Their energy blast missed him by meters. While the bioship tried to figure out where he had gone, Jake restarted his engines and fired a missile point-blank into its weapon ports. The explosion tore the bioship apart from the inside. Jake's communication system crackled to life. "Human pilot." Captain Vexithera's voice was filled with excitement. "How did you do that? Our computers show those bioships adapting to your weapons, but then you kept destroying them anyway." "I kept changing tactics randomly," Jake explained, breathing hard from the adrenaline rush. "Every time they adapted to counter one weapon, I switched to a different one. But more importantly, I never flew the same way twice. Their targeting systems could not predict my movements because I was not following any pattern. But that is not proper military strategy. How can you coordinate attacks with no plan? Jake grinned. Who said anything about coordination? Captain, how many pilots do you have left? 17, spread across 9 ships. Good. I need you to listen carefully. I am going to teach you something humans call combat jazz. It is not about following rules or making plans. It is about reacting, improvising, and doing things that make no sense to anyone, including yourself. More swarm bioships were approaching their position. Jake could see at least 30 of them moving through the asteroid field in perfect formation. Captain, have your pilots choose different weapons. Plasma, particle beams, kinetic projectiles, whatever you have. But here is the important part. Each pilot fights alone. No coordination, no formation flying, no communication during combat. Every pilot does something completely different. That sounds like chaos. Vexithara protested. Exactly. Chaos is what we want. These bioships are designed to counter organized military tactics. They have probably never faced complete randomness before. Jake checked his weapon systems. He was down to 60% ammunition and his ship had taken some damage from debris, but he felt more alive than he ever had before. Captain, are you willing to try this? Because if not, we are all going to die here anyway. There was a long pause. Then Vexithara's voice came back, sounding determined. All Calarian pilots, this is your captain. Forget everything you learned in military academy. We are going to fight like humans, with no plan at all. Jake watched as the 9 remaining Calarian ships emerged from their hiding places among the asteroids. Their elegant, curved hulls gleamed in the starlight as they prepared for battle. Remember, Jake broadcast to all the pilots, be unpredictable. If you think of doing something tactical and smart, do the opposite. If your computer suggests an attack pattern, ignore it. Fight on pure instinct. The swarm bioships accelerated toward them in perfect attack formation. Jake counted 37 enemy vessels, each one larger and more heavily armed than any ship on his side. This is either going to be the most brilliant battle in military history, Jake muttered to himself, or the most spectacular failure. He pushed his throttle forward and dove toward the enemy fleet, firing his remaining missiles at random targets while screaming an old rock and roll song at the top of his lungs. Behind him, the Calarian pilots followed his lead into chaos. The battle that followed was unlike anything ever recorded in galactic military history. Jake watched through his cockpit as Calarian pilot Coulson fired plasma beams while flying upside down in a spiral pattern that made no tactical sense. Another pilot, Yaravan, shot particle weapons at asteroids instead of enemy ships, using the explosions to create debris clouds that confused swarm targeting systems. The bioships were clearly struggling. Jake could see their hulls constantly shifting and changing as they tried to adapt to the chaotic attack patterns. But every time they adapted to counter one pilot's tactics, another pilot would do something completely different. This is working. Captain Vexithara's voice came through the communication channel, sounding amazed. The swarm ships are not coordinating properly. They seem confused. Jake barrel-rolled between 2 bioships and fired his electromagnetic pulse weapon at one while using his kinetic cannon on the other. That is because confusion is contagious, he replied. When you cannot predict what your enemy will do next, you start making mistakes. A Calarian pilot named Zorak was having trouble with the concept. Jake watched him flying in a standard attack formation, approaching his target at the optimal firing angle. The bioship he was targeting had already adapted its hull to counter his plasma weapons. Zorak, break off that attack run. Jake called out. You are flying like a textbook. Do something stupid instead. I do not understand. This is the correct approach vector for maximum damage. Forget about maximum damage. Try minimum damage in the weirdest way possible. Jake watched as Zorak hesitated, then suddenly pulled his ship into a backward loop and fired his weapons while flying away from the target. The plasma beams hit the bioship from an angle it had not expected, punching through hull plating that had adapted for frontal attacks. Excellent, Jake called out. How did that feel? Terrifying, Zorak admitted. But it worked. The swarm was adapting to their new tactics, but slowly. Jake could see the bioships trying to form new attack patterns, but they kept getting confused by the unpredictable human Calarian fighting style. Their perfect formations kept breaking apart as individual ships tried to counter different threats. Captain Vexithara, Jake said during a brief lull in the fighting, We need to combine our approaches. Your pilots are learning chaos, but they are still thinking too much. We need to make this more instinctive. What do you suggest? Jake checked his tactical display. More swarm ships were approaching from the outer system. At least 50 more bioships that would arrive within the hour. Music, Jake said suddenly. I do not understand. Combat jazz works best with actual jazz music. It helps you stop thinking and start feeling the rhythm of the battle. Do your ships have music systems? Yes, but why would we need music during combat? Jake grinned. Trust me on this one, Captain. Have all pilots tuned to frequency 847.2. I'm going to broadcast something that will help. He accessed his personal music collection and selected a fast-paced jazz fusion piece with an unpredictable rhythm. The music filled the communication channels, its chaotic beats and improvised solos echoing through space. Now listen to the music and let it guide your flying. Jake instructed. Do not think about tactics. Do not plan your moves. Just dance with your ship. At first, the Calarian pilots seemed confused by this approach, but gradually Jake could see their flying patterns becoming more fluid, more unpredictable. They began to move with the rhythm of the music, their attack runs flowing like an improvised dance. Yaravan was the first to really understand. Jake watched her ship weave between enemy fire, while her plasma cannons fired in sync with the music's beat. She was not aiming carefully or following attack protocols. She was simply letting the rhythm guide her instincts. This is incredible. Her voice came through the radio, breathless with excitement. I can feel what the enemy ship will do before it does it. Jake nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. When you stopped trying to think your way through combat and started trusting your instincts, you could react faster than conscious thought allowed. The swarm bioships were now completely confused. Their adaptive systems, designed to counter logical military strategies, had no framework for understanding musical combat. They kept trying to adapt to patterns that did not exist, their hulls shifting constantly as they searched for consistent attack methods to counter. Jake, Captain Vex's Thara called out, I am beginning to understand your human approach to warfare, but we have a larger problem approaching. Jake checked his long-range sensors and saw what she meant. A massive swarm hive ship had entered the outer system, a bioconstruct the size of a small moon, accompanied by over 300 smaller vessels. That must be their command ship, Vexithara continued. If it reaches Kalar Prime, my planet is doomed regardless of what we accomplish here. Jake studied the tactical data streaming to his ship. The hive ship was massive, heavily armored, and undoubtedly equipped with adaptation systems far more advanced than the smaller bioships they were fighting. How long until it reaches your planet? Jake asked. 6 hours at its current speed. Jake looked around the battlefield. They had managed to destroy or disable about 20 swarm bioships while losing only 2 Calarian vessels. It was an impressive victory against impossible odds, but it would mean nothing if that hive ship reached Kalar Prime. Captain, we need to retreat and regroup, Jake said reluctantly. We cannot fight a ship that size with what we have left. No, Vexthera replied firmly. We will not abandon our planet. There must be a way. Jake admired her determination, but he also understood military reality. 10 damaged ships, no matter how creatively they fought, could not defeat a hive ship designed to consume entire worlds. Then an idea began forming in his mind. It was completely insane, which made it perfect for their current situation. Captain, what if we did not try to destroy the hive ship? Jake said slowly. What if we tried to confuse it instead? Explain. These bioships adapt by analyzing attack patterns and developing counters. The bigger the ship, the more complex its adaptation systems probably are. What happens when you feed a complex system? Too much conflicting information. Vexithara was quiet for a moment, thinking. System overload. The processing centers would become overwhelmed trying to adapt to contradictory data. Exactly. We cannot destroy that hive ship, but maybe we can make it destroy itself by overloading its adaptation systems. Jake pulled up star charts on his navigation display. Here's what I am thinking. We use the remaining time to teach more of your people our chaotic fighting style. Not just the pilots still in space, but anyone who can fly a ship, cargo haulers, civilian craft, anything that can mount a weapon. You want to attack the hive ship with cargo ships and civilian vessels? I want to attack it with pure chaos. Hundreds of ships, all fighting differently, all using completely random tactics. Feed its adaptation systems so much conflicting information that they cannot process it all. Captain Vexithara was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was filled with a mixture of hope and terror. "Jake Sullivan, you are either the most brilliant military strategist I have ever encountered, or you are completely insane." Jake laughed as he dodged fire from another bioship. "Captain, in my experience, there is not much difference between the two." 3 hours later, Jake found himself leading the most unusual fleet in galactic history. Captain Vexithara had somehow convinced over 200 civilian ships to join their desperate plan. Cargo haulers carried mining lasers. Tourist vessels mounted emergency beacon transmitters as improvised weapons. Even a luxury cruise liner had volunteered, its captain claiming he would rather die fighting than watch his world burn. Jake's fighter hung in space near Kalar Prime, which gleamed like a beautiful crystal jewel against the black void. In the distance, the massive swarm hive ship approached like a dark moon of death, surrounded by its escort of 300 bioships. "All vessels, this is Jake Sullivan," he broadcast on the general frequency. "In 15 minutes, we are going to attempt something that has never been tried before in the history of warfare. We are going to attack using pure chaos." He paused, looking at the tactical display showing hundreds of ship icons scattered around the system. Professional military pilots, civilian cargo haulers, tourist ship captains, even teenagers flying family pleasure craft, all united in their determination to save their world. The key to this working is that nobody follows anyone else's lead. No formations, no coordinated attacks, no communication during the battle. Every pilot fights their own personal war against the hive ship. Use whatever weapons you have in whatever way makes the least sense. Captain Vexthara's voice joined the broadcast. "Citizens of Kalar, we are asking you to forget everything logical about combat. Fight like artists, not soldiers. Fight like you are creating chaos instead of trying to win a battle." Jake checked his chronometer. The hive ship would reach Kalar Prime's orbital defenses in 47 minutes. Those defenses would last perhaps 10 minutes against something that massive. "Remember the music," Jake added, cueing up another jazz fusion piece with an even more complex, unpredictable rhythm. "Let it flow through you. Do not think, just feel and react." As the music began playing across all frequencies, Jake watched the civilian fleet begin to move. Their approach to the hive ship looked nothing like any military formation ever designed. Ships flew in spirals, loops, random zigzag patterns that made no tactical sense whatsoever. The swarm escort vessels moved to intercept them in perfect coordination. Their biohulls began adapting immediately, analyzing the incoming attack patterns and preparing counters. But there were no patterns to analyze, just hundreds of ships all doing completely different things. Jake dove toward the hive ship's surface, firing his remaining kinetic rounds at what looked like sensor clusters. Around him, a cargo hauler, named the Crystal Dawn, was using its mining laser to cut random patterns in the hive ship's hull while flying barrel rolls to the beat of the music. Luxury yacht called Star Dancer approached from the opposite direction, firing emergency flares at biological weapon pods. The flares did no real damage, but they created bright lights and electromagnetic interference that confused the hive ship's targeting systems. The hive ship itself was massive beyond imagination. Jake's fighter was like an insect buzzing around a mountain. Its surface was covered with organic-looking weapon ports, sensor arrays, and what appeared to be breathing vents. The entire structure pulsed with malevolent life. As more ships joined the attack, Jake could see the hive ship's surface beginning to change. Sections of hull armor were shifting and adapting, trying to counter the dozens of different weapon types being used against it. But the adaptation process was becoming frantic, almost desperate. "It is working," Captain Vexithara called out over the communication channel. "The bioneural networks are becoming overloaded. Look at the surface changes. They are contradicting each other." Jake could see what she meant. Parts of the hive ship's hull were adapting for energy weapons, while other sections were growing armor for kinetic attacks. Some areas were developing reflective surfaces, while nearby sections were creating absorption matrices. The adaptation systems were fighting against themselves. A civilian pilot named Brentol, flying a converted pleasure yacht, was attacking the hive ship by ramming into smaller surface structures and then pulling away before impact. His ship was not doing any real damage, but it was forcing the hive ship's defensive systems to adapt for ramming attacks that never quite happened. Meanwhile, Yaravan was flying her military fighter in tight circles around a major weapon cluster, firing random bursts from different weapons while singing along with the jazz music. Her attacks had no pattern, No purpose except to create confusion. The hive ship's escort of bioships was becoming increasingly disorganized. Their perfect formations had broken down as individual ships tried to adapt to dozens of different chaotic attack patterns. Some bioships were spinning aimlessly, their adaptation systems locked in loops trying to counter tactics that changed every few seconds. Jake noticed something strange happening to the hive ship's surface. The constant adaptation was causing sections of hull to grow and change so rapidly that they were interfering with each other. Weapon ports were being covered by new armor growth, then uncovered, then covered again as different adaptation systems fought for control. All ships, focus your most chaotic attacks on the central command structure, Jake broadcast, indicating a large organic tower rising from the hive ship's surface. But remember, no two ships should attack the same way. What followed was the most beautiful disaster Jake had ever witnessed. Over 200 ships converged on the command tower, each one attacking differently. Mining lasers, plasma cannons, kinetic projectiles, electromagnetic pulses, even simple collision attacks, all happening simultaneously with no coordination whatsoever. The hive ship's central adaptation systems, trying to process and counter dozens of different attack types at once, began to fail catastrophically. The command tower's surface was changing so rapidly that it looked like it was melting and reforming every few seconds. Then, something extraordinary happened. The bioneural networks controlling the hive ship's adaptive systems overloaded completely. The feedback cascaded through the ship's organic computer systems like a virus, causing massive system failures throughout the vessel. Jake watched in amazement as weapon ports across the hive ship's surface began closing randomly. Engine systems stuttered and died. The massive ship began to drift as its navigation systems failed. The central command network is collapsing, Vexithera reported, her voice filled with wonder. The feedback is spreading to all connected bioships in the escort fleet. Indeed, the 300 swarm vessels surrounding the hive ship were beginning to show signs of the same system failures. Their perfect formations dissolved into chaos as individual ships lost coordination with the hive mind. But Jake knew they were not finished yet. A ship that large would have backup systems, redundant networks, emergency protocols. They had maybe minutes before the swarm recovered from the overload. All ships, this is our chance, he broadcast. The hive ship is vulnerable. Hit everything that looks important, but keep fighting chaotically. Do not let their systems adapt again. The civilian fleet responded with enthusiasm that bordered on madness. Cargo haulers rammed into weapon clusters. Pleasure craft fired mining charges into what looked like command centers. Even the luxury cruise liner Celestial Dream contributed by using its powerful communication array to broadcast loud, random electromagnetic noise that interfered with bioneural recovery. Attempts. Jake dove toward what appeared to be the hive ship's primary power core, a massive organic structure, pulsing with sickly green light. He fired his last missile directly into its center, then pulled up sharply as the explosion tore through multiple decks of the bioship. The power core's destruction triggered a chain reaction throughout the hive ship. Secondary explosions bloomed across its surface like deadly flowers. The massive vessel began breaking apart, its organic hull unable to maintain structural integrity without the central power systems. All ships, retreat to safe distance, Jake called out as he watched the hive ship begin its death throes. This thing is going to blow. The civilian fleet scattered just as the hive ship's core systems failed completely. The explosion, when it came, lit up half the solar system with brilliant white light. The shock wave destroyed most of the remaining escort bioships and sent debris flying in all directions. Jake's fighter tumbled through space, its systems temporarily blinded by the massive explosion. When his vision cleared and his instruments came back online, he saw empty space where the swarm fleet had been. A few scattered bioships were fleeing toward the outer system, but the main force was gone. Jake, Captain Vexithera's voice came through his radio, filled with emotion. Look toward Kalar Prime. Jake turned his fighter and saw the most beautiful sight he had ever witnessed. The crystal planet hung in space like a perfect jewel, untouched and safe. Around it, hundreds of civilian ships were dancing victory rolls, their pilots cheering over the communication channels. We did it, Jake whispered to himself, hardly believing it was true. We actually did it. No, Vexithera corrected him gently. You did it. You came to help when no one else would. You taught us to fight in ways we never imagined. You saved 17 billion lives with nothing but chaos and jazz music. Jake laughed, feeling exhaustion and relief wash over him. Captain, I could not have done.